Hi guys, I'm back and I'm going to show you how to roll out your short crust pastry. Now there are a couple of methods that I use and there's specific reasons why I use those. Now today my end product is going to be little fruit empanadas, so I don't need to shape the dough into anything, but I'm going to show you how to do that anyway. So I'm going to divide my dough into half and show you the two techniques I have for rolling out. Okay, so I'm back, and the first method that I like to use in my classroom is this one. I have put a nice big piece of cling film on top of my surface. Now, if you want the cling film to stick to the surface, just wet the surface just a tiny bit with your hand and then put the cling film over the top, and I promise it will stay down on the surface. I am then going to take my dough, pop it into the center of my cling film. Now you can sprinkle a little bit of flour over the top to stop it from sticking. I always have a little pot of flour next to me, or a little bowl, or I just have a little lump on my counter. And I also put a little bit on my rolling pin to stop anything from sticking. Guys, please try and use minimal flour. There are many reasons why I like this method. When you are a beginner pastry maker, very often I find that people put too much flour on their surface, and then what happens is you're starting to change the ratio in your flour to fat in your pastry. Also, what I find is when people start making pastry, they start rolling it out, they use a lot of flour, and then if they make a mistake or they think they've made a mistake, they scrunch everything together, and all the flour that they put on the surface comes into the middle, and it prevents the pastry from sticking together again. So you get this pastry that sort of sits like this, but as soon as you try and use it, it breaks apart. So I like this method for beginners especially, because they don't use that additional flour. Now, rolling out is a skill, and we are going to try and keep the pressure on both sides of the rolling pin as even as possible. We tend to put more pressure on our dominant hand, that's my right hand, so therefore we often get more pressure on this side and the pastry becomes uneven. So really try and practice keeping your pressure even on both sides of your rolling pin. When you roll out, start from the middle and then gently, you do not have to roll everything out in one go. So from the center up, from the center down. Right, now what I've done is I've just pushed my pastry a little bit so that it's more of a square shape. Just because it depends on what you're lining, but it does make it easier to roll it out like that. Then we're going to carry on going up and down from the center. Please don't push too hard. You're doing this in steps. You don't have to make everything thin right from the word go. Now this method is great because even if your dough sticks to your surface, you can literally just pick up the whole piece of cling film, flip it through 90 degrees, and I'm going to do that now so that I can carry on showing you how to roll. So I'm taking my whole piece of cling film and moving it. Just make sure that you smooth it out again. It doesn't have to be perfect, guys, because you won't see the wrinkles. So now I've flipped it so that I have my pastry in the opposite direction at 90 degrees to what I was rolling. And I'm going to do exactly the same thing. Start in the middle and push my rolling pin up and down. And I'm going to keep going until my pastry is about the thickness of a pound coin. Alright guys, so I've done that, and my pastry is about the thickness of a pound coin now. And this is again where your hands are one of your most important tools. So when you rub your hands over the surface of your pastry, you will immediately pick up whether there are bumps in your pastry and where it is uneven, if the ends are going down, if you've got ridges on the inside of it. Guys, remember what I was telling you about the sensitivity of our fingertips? That's how blind people can read Braille, because we can pick up with our fingertips any kind of irregularity on a surface, which is why it's important to be able to be in touch with your food. So now I'm going to show you how we can use this pastry. Now I'm going to be making empanadas, so I'm just going to show you this method. I'm not actually going to finish it up. So I've got if I was making a quiche, I would be using one of these. Once I've rolled out my pastry, I pop my dish over my pastry to see whether I have enough all the way around to be able to fill this dish without having any gaps. But again, don't worry if your pastry, if it's mostly big enough, and say you've got a little gap here, you can, short crust pastry is very forgiving. You can just patch it in with a little. Please don't squish it up and then roll it out again. The more you squish it and roll it out, the more you are developing the gluten, and therefore your pastry is going to get more tough and you're going to develop more of the gluten, so there is more chance of that gluten shrinking when it bakes. Right, now here's one of the other reasons why I love this method so much, especially for beginner pastry chefs. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to lift my cling film and I'm going to pop my hand underneath it, but I'm not going to remove the cling film. So I've got my cling film and I've got my other hand underneath my pastry. I'm then simply going to take the whole lot and I'm going to flip it over onto my dish. Now, especially with beginner pastry chefs or pastry makers, the pastry tends to break a lot. Their technique isn't developed yet, and with this one we can actually make sure that our technique is good. So I'm then going to hold my pastry like this. I'm going to lift it because I'm just trying to get the right angle here. I'm going to lift it because I don't want my pastry to break. I'm then going to curl my other finger. Don't remove the plastic, and I'm simply going to ease that pastry in, lifting it, and I'm going to do that all the way around. Keep lifting the edges of the pastry, right, and wherever I have a little fold, I'm just going to push that back. And then what you can do, once you've got that, can you see? It's all in the edges, but you haven't dug your finger into it anywhere. So I'm going to keep my finger like that, and I'm literally going to keep going all the way around until I have my pastry formed and shaped to what I want to bake. So then I can gently ease out the edges of my pastry, and once I've done that, once I have done everything and my pastry is ready, I can then simply just gently peel off the cling film, and that is going to be your base. Right, now there are two schools of thought on this. Some people bake, that they blind bake, and I'll show you that in a different video. They blind bake it with the edges of the pastry intact, and then when it comes out of the oven they slice off the edges. Some people slice the edges off before, but I will cover that in another video. Right, now my second way is I'm going to show you first of all how to do the sprinkling. So you are going to sprinkle a little bit of flour on your surface. Now guys, do it as if you were sprinkling salt or pepper onto something. The moment you touch it, it will ruin what you've just done. So please use a sprinkle effect and then leave it before you put your pastry on it. Right, so now I've got my second piece of pastry ready and I have floured the surface. Now I'd like to show you, this is how I prefer to do my flour. I just have a little pile so that I can just keep adding it with my fingers if I need it. But it's on the side, guys, and I'm not going to use all that flour, otherwise again I'm going to change the ratio of my pastry. So I'm going to get my rolling pin and I'm just going to pinch up a little bit of flour and cover my rolling pin. And again, same motion as I did with the other one, from the middle, and try and use even pressure, guys. Now, the most important thing is that I find that people don't do is they don't lift their pastry to make sure that it's not sticking on the surface. So make sure that you lift your pastry, make sure that it's not sticking, just sort of brush some more flour, and you can flip it over. Short crust pastry is very forgiving. It's not quite like puff pastry or rough puff pastry, and you're going to keep doing that until your pastry, and keep moving it collect some flour and keep moving it until your pastry is about a pound thick. And there we have it, guys, our 2 methods for rolling out short crust pastry and making sure that it's ready to use for whatever we're going to use it for. Enjoy and start practicing.